Now I'm curious, as we transition, like I mentioned before, you were recently appointed here to the Curtis Institute of Music as a cello teacher along with two other cellists, making you, I guess, colleagues now with Mr. Hoffman, yeah, which is, I'm sure,
Weird.
I'm curious, what is your teaching philosophy, and just on a more practical level, how is it juggling your life with the BSO and teaching here at Curtis, aside from the fact that you, I'm sure, are racking up a bunch of mileage points? And how does each discipline complement the other for you?
That's a great question, but there were a lot of questions.
So yeah, so it was like a 4-part question.
I still can't believe it. The fact that I'm colleagues, right, with these great artists. Just earlier today, I ran into Mr. Ashkenazi, and he was like, "Oh, you're my colleague now." Haha. So it's completely surreal in that sense, and I think I'm flattered, but I really consider myself as a lifelong student. I think there are lessons to be learned in every situation, bad or good.
Yeah.
And from observing babies, you learn how to breathe, because they don't have the external stress, so they just breathe as normal. Yeah. And that's, in a way, the most natural way of breathing. And then as we get older, we get stressed and our breath is up here, and so we almost, I think, again, it's being open-minded and being aware to learn from all the situations that life gives you. So it's an adjustment. I look at this year as an adjustment for me. I am greatly honored, but I'm also still adjusting to my life in Boston, playing in the orchestra. There's so much great rep that I am still not as familiar with. And I want to be present for that. Yeah. So I focus, it helps me, I think, juggling these different roles in my life, wearing different hats. It helps me focus in the moment. Because I think previously I would think about the future or the past and, all these things. Yeah. But now I almost don't have time for that. So I try to be present and be my best in the moment. And I think it's an important skill that we all need to learn and work on. Yeah. And so, yes, I do have less time to practice. I don't really know how to manage that, but I'm learning and I'm observing, and I ask, to how did you do this? And there's so many lessons you can learn from friends, colleagues, mentors. Yeah. And even with the students I work with here, I learn so much from them. Yeah. I look at it more as, okay, I have a bit more experience. This is my experience. Sure. I'm happy to share it, but let's discuss it. Rather than this is my way and you will follow. Yeah. Right? Because if I have a teaching philosophy, I think it's to help them get to their best self. Yeah. And that's going to look different for every person. Yeah. So I have to be able to adapt. I can't insist one way and you will do it this way. Right. Right? So I think it's not only that I can teach the cello. Yes, we can talk about the technical, the foundations, and the fundamental things that's required of us. But how we get to that point, how we understand that is going to be different. Yeah. So I think about, if I feel that maybe what I'm saying right now is not clicking with someone, then maybe that week I'll think about how I can describe it in a different way and go at it again. So that's a huge learning experience for me. Yeah. And I love it. And I think because I have less time to practice, again, I can be more mindful when I have that chance and moment to practice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love what you mentioned about just your approach to teaching, because I think I would like to think it's more of an outdated style of teaching, but there was a period of time where teachers just were very kind of militant, where they were like, you do this, you do that, this is what's written, here's my fingerings, like stuff like that. And, you know, again, I think I talked about this in a previous episode, but that kind of teaching really stunts a person's ability to grow and even just to be curious, I would say. So, I mean, I'd like to think that a lot of the younger teachers now have more of the approach that you have, where it's like, let's talk about it. Let's dive into like why these markings are there, or like what it is that, like what kind of colors, what kind of imagination is in your head when it comes to this particular phrase. So yeah, no, I think that's a really beautiful thing. Just
if I can add something about that, I still think there is value in the, let's say, the old school method teaching, because I think in visual art, the way they learn, maybe one of the ways they learn, I don't know much about it, is to copy the great masters. And there's something, it's in the journey that in trying to copy, you discover many, many things, right? So I do think it's really important to instill good musical values. And that's another conversation. But I sometimes worry, am I too flexible? Am I doing enough to instill good musical values? Because, I mean, I'm not a parent, but even in parenting, you can't just be nice all the time. It's not about that. It's teaching your child the good and the ability to tell good and the bad. And I think that's so important. So it's a question really for me, how do I do that without being militant, but being strict, I think is important. And I think it's a different culture now, right? Not only in music, but in many areas, that we do talk, being aware, and we're talking about how we feel, our mental space is really important. But I think growing a thick skin and having that resilience is also a really important skill in life, not only in music. So I sometimes question if we're going a little too much to the other side. Again, we'll see. Easy to say in hindsight, right? So just things that are in my mind.
Well, and I know this is your first semester, so do you have your own studio, or are all the students kind of sharing with the other faculty members here?
So we do have our own studios. There are 2 studios. But there's a lot of flexibility. We want to create an environment where there's open communication. Not only among students, but also teachers. So we're constantly in touch and discuss. We share studio classes, so we do get to see everyone in that sense. And again, it's also, I think it's an important life skill to communicate well. So we want to create that environment for the students to be part of.
Yeah, and just going back to juggling Boston and here, like, how has that been? Like, what's your schedule like? Do you come in fairly regularly? Like, how does that work?
So per semester, this semester I'm coming 8 times a semester, and next spring I'm planning for 9 times. Luckily, it's worked out well that I could start teaching early September, where I had some time off from orchestra, because we were coming out of the whole full summer season. And I have some flexibility in my weeks to arrange so that I'm not constantly running around. But it is challenging. It is busy, definitely. But I make the most of it, really, because I'm so fortunate to have this responsibility. And I take it seriously. I think I've been also wrestling with really truly believing what mental practice means, as I actually don't always have that physical energy to play.
Right.
So I try to be as efficient as possible. I try to prioritize my well-being, however, in this busy schedule, because I have to be in a good place to give my best. So yeah, it's a fine balance.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's repertoire with the Boston Symphony where you're just like, okay, I need to look at that like well in advance. So you're probably like preparing ahead as you juggle your teaching.
So important. Preparing ahead is the key to life. Key to success.
Yeah.